Okay, I call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see people in the gallery this evening. Everyone's present. We'll begin with a moment of reflection and respect. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, confirmation of the agenda.
That council adopts the agenda for the meeting of September the 6th, 2023 as presented.
Mover and seconder, Councilor Desrosiers and Councilor Oslach. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, item 5, we have a public meeting this evening. We're going to, let's begin first of all with the motion.
That the presentation from Stantec regarding the Parks and Recreation Master Plan be received for information, in that the comments from the members of the public be received for information, and that staff be directed to bring forward a final Parks and Recreation Master Plan for approval at the September 20th, 2023 meeting of council.
Mover and seconder, Councilor Van Raes and Deputy Mayor Barber. Okay, we proceed as follows. First of all, we'll have a presentation by Stantec by Moira Davidson, I believe, and Haley Sadler. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Yes, that's great. Good. All right. So
Excellent.
when the presentation is finished, I will ask if there's any members of the public who wish to speak, and you come forward and state your name and speak and ask questions. And after that, we have council discussion on that. So Moira or Haley, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council, for having us this evening. As you had stated previously, this is the public open house for the Almar Parks and Recreation Master Plan. My name is Moira Davidson. I'm an intermediate planner with Stantec Consulting. I was the planning lead for this project, and I'm here with Haley Sadler, who is the landscape architecture team lead out of the London office, and she was the landscape lead for this project. So I just want to recap what a Parks and Recreation Master Plan is and what we have achieved to this point. So we're going to go briefly through a timeline of events for this project, so what has been undertaken and how we got to this point, and then we're going to review the kind of table of contents that we have proposed as part of the master plan, and then a final few slides that detail a couple of the recommendations we have. We're not going to go through all 60 plus of them today, but we will make the plan available for those online or it will be available online for those who want to review it either after the meeting so that we can provide and obtain other comments from the public. So as I was saying, a Parks and Rec Master Plan, it's going to provide a long-term vision for Parks and Recreation in Aylmer. It's going to detail policies and standards for day-to-day decisions that allow for yourselves as the town and council to respond to new opportunities in parks and recreation, while also ensuring that your community has adequate parks, facilities, and programs to meet your current and future needs. So as previously stated, we will go through a project overview. So this was undertaken in a three-phase approach. We had the background research as part of the first phase, and we did an inventory of existing conditions, and then an assessment of existing conditions as well. And this is also where we developed a in-depth public consultation strategy. And in this first phase, we also held our public open house sessions, as well as numerous surveys were sent out to the community, and we'll provide a summary of that engagement further on. But as we moved into phase 2, we were able to undertake kind of a strengths and weaknesses analysis and then identify areas of improvement that the town could look to in the future, and then also determine some strategic directions and visioning for what Parks and Recreation could look like in the town of Elmer. And then finally, in phase 3, we went through with the action plan implementation and monitoring, which is the development of the draft and final master plan, of which you'll see in front of yourselves and available online later this evening. So just to summarize what we kind of started with as our baseline, we did use a lot of census data for a lot of the justification behind why certain services are provided or why a certain number of playgrounds, for example, is provided for population. So the census information is the data we were using, just because we have found in the past and in past experiences, this is able to be data truth through various resources and sources at different levels of government. So as you can see, Elmer has a pretty typical population pyramid and a pretty equal distribution of female to males. And the population growth rate is expected to grow to a population of 10,000, almost 11,000 actually by 2051. And that's the numbers that we were kind of basing this plan on. So the plan is a 10 to 20 year plan, and it's assuming that the population will be almost 11,000 people by the end of this plan. So the engagement that was completed to date as part of this master plan project, we did undertake one site tour as part of the kickoff just to get a better understanding of what the existing conditions are and what the offerings you currently provide. We also undertook some surveys as well as some open houses, and we were very successful in the survey responses we received. It was actually one of the larger amount of survey responses, and considering the especially when you consider the population distribution, it was excellent. So commendment to the public for being interested in this project, and we thank you for that involvement. But here you can see the public survey responses, as well as the youth survey responses and senior responses that we got from those surveys. Then we also hosted 2 public open houses, I guess including this one. And then we also received 150 public open house comments in the first round of commentary. So now I'll just briefly recap what the Parks and Rec Master Plan looks like if you haven't had a chance to kind of take a look for yourself. So there is a Parks and Rec Master Plan overview that we have in the preliminary introductory section of the master plan, just to kind of get a sense of what it is and what it does and how it will help the town. There's also some legislation, policies, and practices in Elmer and how this aligns with how this plan will align with all those other plans. The details aren't specific, but we did do a very detailed analysis of these policies in the preliminary background stages. So if anyone is interested in that detailed policy analysis, that is able to be provided in those preliminary reports. We then do a community of Elmer review, understanding what the demographics look like, what the age profile is like for the community, and what's anticipated for the future. And then we do a brief assessment of what the benefits and trends of Parks and Recreation are, just to give a general understanding of the benefits it can bring to your community. Then we jump into the fulsome assessment. So we do an assessment of parks and open space, trails and pathways, and then outdoor facilities, indoor facilities, service levels, and programming. And then at the very back end, we get to the recommendations and the implementation strategy that we recommend for the town. So here's a brief summary of what the benefits and trends of Parks and Recreation are. If you were in attendance at our open house or took part in our surveys, you've probably heard this before, but there are many benefits to providing Parks and Recreation services as part of a municipal initiative. And this includes, enhancing mental and physical well-being of residents, enhancing social well-being, helping people connect to nature, building strong families and communities, providing, economic benefits by investing in recreation that could provide tourism, for example, or different sport activities for the community. And then different trends that we do look at as part of this and kind of guide some of the recommendations that we have made include, demographic trends, behavioral trends, environmental and ecological trends, service delivery trends, and facilities and infrastructure trends. And generally it relates to, demographics, we're seeing aging populations, and how do we ensure that people are able to age in place and have appropriate access to parks and recreation as they age in place. Behavioral, just the notion of the benefits that parks and recreation provide for mental and physical well-being, and the investment that you can make in parks and recreation potentially reduces the investment you need to make in, say, healthcare in the future. So just those benefits there, and then environmental and ecological, just the connection and that people can have with nature, as well as the benefits that providing a more naturalized area can have for enhancing ecosystems and just improving overall ecosystem health. Then service delivery, and facilities and infrastructure. Some trends we're seeing, and you'll see some recommendations related to it, are just that it's moving away from a kind of siloed approach of parks and recreation, and increasing the partnerships between service delivery departments within the town. So, we're seeing more of collaboration between parks and recreation and social services and fire departments, for example, or libraries. Rather than having standalone facilities, it's beneficial to have all of those under one roof if that's possible, so that you're saving on costs and you're saving on staffing to provide those services when you're having it all at the same place, and also having to only fund the lights and the water for one facility versus 4. So now we'll go into the vision and the strategic directions. So the vision and the strategic directions are what guide the recommendations. This came from the feedback we heard from the public in the first round of consultation, and we worked through kind of what we and the town staff see the vision being for Parks and Rec in the future. So we're seeing a Parks and Rec vision is ensuring a safe and inclusive environment for families to live, work, and play through the provision of accessible, affordable, and inclusive recreational programming, facilities, assets, infrastructure, and green space to meet current and future needs. And then the strategic directions break down into, I believe there are 4 we have, and it focuses on the different kind of themes of recreation. So we have a strategic direction for what parks and trails should look like, a direction for what indoor infrastructure should look like, what outdoor infrastructure should look like, and then what programming and service delivery should look like. So for example, for Parkland and Trails, looking to provide parkland and trails in a network fashion that allows for a diverse and inclusive and affordable range of opportunities for, all those of people of all ages and abilities. And then we have for the indoor municipal recreational facilities, similarly, making sure that it's accessible, affordable, inclusive, and that there's opportunities to standardize partnerships and coordinate services so that there's no accidental overlap in what external providers are providing versus what the town is providing. As for recreational programming, we have the potential to ensure that the needs of the community are currently being met with the programs that are being offered, but there's also options to cater these programs to the changing needs of the community, as well as promotion of these activities and these programs to the community members at the broader region, so not just within the town of Aylmer. And finally, we have a strategic direction related to the town's assets and how to manage those. So just ensuring that there's a central contact for the public who's responsible for the management of all indoor and outdoor facilities, as well as someone who's overseeing the provisions of the programming provided within each of these facilities. So now I will summarize kind of some recommendations that we have. As I stated previously, there are some themes that these recommendations have. There are 68 in total. I won't go through 68, just for minding of the time and so that we can get people to ask questions and get a conversation going. But I will summarize at least 6 for each of these sections. So legislation and policy, parks, trails, and open space, indoor recreational facilities and services, program and service delivery, management of project staff and financing, and then finally monitoring. So these are just a summary of kind of the key six, I would say, recommendations that we have. Once you go through the master plan itself, there's actually some timing assigned to each recommendation, and it just prioritizes, or it's what we think that you should prioritize as part of staff or as council. But again, this is just a draft format, so if you have any comments on what we've indicated as, a short-term priority versus a long-term priority, we'd be happy to discuss that and edit it as required. But for the legislation and policy recommendations, so one of the first ones has to do with the adjustment of development charges to reflect, the needs and expectations of the community. And this is related to the community benefits charge that was previously released, and just ensuring that there's an ongoing review of the development charges, whether that be new provincial policy comes out or there's need to ensure that Parks and Recreation and servicing is adequately addressed in those. That recommendation, just covers that notion. And then we also have a recommendation here where there's consideration of a townwide community improvement plan to assist in creating additional active transportation linkages on private property to enhance the use of parks, recreation, and cultural facilities. So a lot of what we found is that Aylmer provides a lot of services currently and has some excellent green spaces, but the linkages and connections kind of to and from those spaces could be improved, and that's something that we have focused on as part of this master plan. And that recommendation just kind of guides that theme, that if you improve the linkages, then you improve the overall network of parks and recreation in the town. There's also the suggestion to create a formalized application process for anyone looking to suggest new town-owned recreation or cultural facilities. So as suggested, Aylmer, we believe, is currently providing adequate services in lots of regards, but there's always kind of new trends in recreation that are coming out, and we want to make sure that the community members have some type of formal path to either discuss this with the town or make some type of recommendation over the next 10 years, that if there's a program or facility or amenity that they're wanting to use, that they would be able to suggest that and do some kind of background research for the town before that's kind of brought forward for yourselves, council, or before staff to actually look into it further and see if it's, financially viable or other regards. And then we have updated population projections. This is related to us using the 2021 census information and the county not being completed their population projections at the time that this master plan recommendations came out. And then also the notion that we are due for another census count in coming years. So just ensuring that when that comes out, if there are changes to census information or there are changes to population, the targets that we have set in this master plan are kind of readjusted and realigned at that time to make sure that you are still on target to meet the needs of the various parkland amenities that you currently provide. There's also recommendation to provide updated mapping for parks, trails, and pathways and facilities. And this will just allow for the town to provide a visual consolidation of what is currently provided. And it also will allow for current development applications to be shown and illustrated, and then potentially see where gaps need to be filled. If it's not in that existing location, where in the town, from a geographical perspective, needs more land, and that would be an easy visual way to see where that is. And then finally, recommendation to review a range of parkland acquisition strategies and not rely, solely on the development of acquiring parkland through development. We are seeing that there, with changes in provincial legislation, we never can be certain on what land will be able to be acquired as part of parkland. So it will be a good idea for the town to consider some type of acquisition strategy that creates some unique ideas on how to expand additional parkland without requiring development to happen to do that. So the next theme of recommendations relates to parks and open space. So a key recommendation we have here is the parkland target that we recommend. And we're recommending that Elmer adopt a parkland target of 4 hectares per 1,000 population. And on top of that, once that is achieved, parks should also be provided within a 5 to 10 minute walking radius. So it's roughly 500 meters from residents to allow for accessible outdoor recreation opportunities. So this relates to the trail connections and the pathway connections that were spoken about on the previous slide. Just the notion of being able to provide not only parkland at the service level target, but also ensuring that people are able to adequately access that through, trails, sidewalk connections, what have you, to make sure that everyone is able to access this parkland. The second recommendation we have here is to complete a review of playground facilities and determine timelines for replacement of aging infrastructure. So this could be coordinated with upgrades to playground facilities to improve, playground design, accessibility, inclusive and innovative play spaces. And this is just something that we saw in our initial review that this was a need of yours, so it's just something that we did recommend as part of this strategy. And again, similar to the previous slide where we spoke about updating the targets based on growing population, it's also ensuring that there's proper maintenance and upgrade plans in place for the infrastructure to support the growing needs of the population as the population grows. We also have found that there is a need for more outdoor facilities that are targeted towards seniors to support an active aging population. So looking at things like low intensity activities, less structured or passive recreational spaces where feasible will really help that age in place ideology that I spoke about previously. There's also some benefits to considering opportunities for volunteers. So being able to work with volunteer organizations or community partners would help enhance cultural opportunities within the town's recreation areas. So whether that's, incorporating murals or interpretive features or local events, being able to activate the current spaces you have through those partnerships will really benefit the current spaces that you provide and provide activities for current and future populations. And finally, the recommendation we have, the final parks and open space recommendation we have is that when exploring opportunities for new outdoor facilities, that you aim to combine amenities. So whether this is combining indoor and outdoor amenity spaces all in one, this will allow users to have access to a variety of facilities and amenities at one location. It saves you money from having to fund multiple locations, and it also saves staff time and staff capacity, when you're maintaining one location versus 4. And similarly, when it comes to family activities or family involvement in parks and recreation, multiple uses in one facility allow for each member of the family to find something that they like and can get involved in. Indoor recreation facility recommendations. The first one we have is to consider establishing a joint use agreement between the town and the school boards. This would be specifically for the use of school gymnasiums to allow for indoor gym use, which we found is there is a current lack in Elmer as of date. But this would allow for use of gymnasium space without the need to build an existing facility, as we do not anticipate Elmer to be having a population that would allow for a new indoor facility at this time. There's also the possibility to consider refurbishment or expansion of the EECC and potentially collaborate with local partner, to do so. And that would also potentially meet the need of gymnasium space within the town. So those are kind of two related, recommendations, and it's just considering which one works the best for the town at this time. And finally, there's some opportunities to explore coordinated efforts with Elgin County and the community groups to provide age-friendly and age-specific programming and events at the Elmer Old Town Hall Library, because we did find that that is the most frequently visited indoor facility, and just making sure that there are no kind of overlapping events or programming, and it just makes it so that we're not duplicating efforts in that regard. There's also some consideration if you are either considering refurbishment or expansion or a new facility, to consider incorporating energy efficient upgrades, such as rainwater harvesting. And this could help both existing and planned indoor recreation facilities. Similar to the recommendation on the previous slide, if you are developing a new indoor facility, creating it to be a modern multi-use facility where access can be made to a variety of recreational programs that would be beneficial to the community. And finally, we recommend that there is an ongoing partnership with the Township of Malahide to continue to own and operate the EECC, so that it continues to be maintained and supported for both populations for indoor and outdoor programming, as it continues to be an efficient way to provide parks and recreation for the town. Next, we have programs and service delivery. So we found that there was a need to create better advertising around the programs that the town currently offers. So a lot of the recommendations we have here relate to that. So the first one we have here is just exploring more options in the promotion and advertising of programs and events being offered. And also having an annual evaluation of usage and participation will allow for you to properly plan for what programs are kind of popular and what programs are not as popular, but also making sure that the rental spaces provided are also adequate and of satisfaction to the users. Again, this relates to kind of some indications on previous slides about community partnerships and community organizations, but just making sure that there's open dialogue with these community groups to ensure that there's no duplications of service and you're not competing with one another in providing a certain service. And then there is recommendation to provide a standard for programming to be provided by the town. So whatever your standard level of service is, that is what your facilities will be maintained to. And then should a user group wish to have some type of level of service that is above and beyond the base level of service that you decide upon, the fees for that group may increase to improve the resources that they're specifically asking for, or it could be you working with that community group specifically to obtain funding to increase that level of service beyond the base level. And then the next two relate to volunteering and collaboration, and just ensuring community involvement in parks and recreation to allow for more events to happen, festivals, recreational programming. And then that there is collaboration and partnerships with local school boards, similar to what was stated before about the gymnasium use, but just ensuring that there are facility agreements in place so that you are able to efficiently and effectively use those spaces as needed to potentially fill in any gaps that you are not able to provide on your current municipal owned facilities. I believe this might be the final one. Okay, we have just two more, so I'll just briefly touch on project staff and financing and then monitoring, and then we'll get into the Q&A session. But we have a recommendation to work with a park design consultant to create a guidance document, to create some of a toolkit of what your standard park should look like. And then that will help with meeting industry standards and meeting the needs of the community as you develop future parks and open spaces. We also found or recommend that you maximize the efficiency of facilities and infrastructure systems to ensure their long-term sustainability. So this relates to, the refurbishment of existing facilities, or if there's a facility that's potentially underutilized, looking to maximize that facility prior to looking to invest in a new facility, just so that you are utilizing the infrastructure that you already have. And from a cost savings perspective, that makes the most sense in the current standpoint. From a funding perspective, we recommend that additional funding resources be considered and that annual grant research be undertaken. Regarding lease agreements, we recommend the standardization of all lease agreements for all facility, amenity, and user types. This would generally look like a kind of collaborative workshop environment, but it's just ensuring that everyone who uses the spaces in the town of Aylmer are agreeing to the same standard of agreement and are getting the same, price per hour, per user type, per user group, and it's just ensuring that it's equitable across the board. For increasing efficiencies in management, so just ensuring that there's one person who's in charge of kind of reviewing and assessing all the Parks and Recreation services, and it's a department's created where it's well managed, efficient, and innovative, so that it's constantly thinking about trends in Parks and Recreation and how Parks and Recreation in the town can be improved. And then finally, just recommending that the town maintain a full list and inventory of recreation services that are provided, as well as service delivery providers. And having this be updated on the town regularly would just allow people and residents to kind of know what's going on. It's something that we had heard at the open houses and through public consultation that I guess a lot of residents were kind of surprised to hear that the town offered something, or there was a private service provider, in the town that did offer this. So we believe that would be a real benefit to the town. The final monitoring recommendations we have is completing a regular survey of residents in the town of Aylmer kind of every 3 years, just to make sure that the community needs regarding Parks and Recreation are still being met, and if any priorities need to be shifted as in this Parks and Recreation master plan, and then that can be done on a 3-year basis. And then there's also a recommendation to have timelines and recommendations from your asset management plan be similarly considered when you are upgrading aging Parks and Recreation facilities. And then at the time of service delivery, it's recommended that some type of metric, or survey be provided at the time of service delivery. So whether it's you're providing skating lessons or summer camp or some type of program, there's a service delivery survey as part of that sign up, or as upon completion of that program, so that you're able to regularly assess user satisfaction and kind of shift programming as needed. And then finally, just having Parks and Recreation facilities be regularly assessed to identify deficiencies and opportunities, and then identify existing and future municipal policies where these Parks and Recreation recommendations can be incorporated into, whether that be planning policy or asset management policy, just making sure that all things align. So that concludes the recommendations we do have. I'll just briefly summarize next steps before we jump into the FAQ section. But we will be consolidating the comments received tonight and incorporating them into the final master plan. We hope to do this, by the end of this week, or shortly after. I believe we're holding this till the 20th. I believe it's open till comments on, but then we can, edit the comments for final review, get this drafted up, and then we'll be bringing this to council for adoption at the end of September. So those are the next steps that we are looking to. I would now like to open it up to either members of the public or council for questions or comments.
Very good. Excuse me. Thank you for that presentation. Thank you for walking us through the recommendations, or maybe I should say jogging us through the recommendation. There's quite a lot of material here. If I may be allowed 15 seconds of comment before I open it up to the public, I think that the main points that are being made here is that the important parts of this master plan involve volunteers, involve partnerships with people in the area, involve measurement and inventories, and of course involve some enhancements. It's kind of a 10,000 foot review. So this whole thing is not a council project. It's a community whole town project. So it involves all of you as well as our thoughts here. So I'd like to open it up first to the public. If anyone there would like to make a comment or have a question, if you proceed to the mic and give us your name and where you're from. Don't be shy.
Hi, everybody. My name is DJ Smale, longtime resident of Aylmer. I say Aylmer, but I just live outside in Malahide, but I consider myself an Aylmer resident. Went to school in Aylmer, too. A few points about the report and having read it. And this is going to focus directly on pickleball to begin with. We have a large group of pickleball players in Aylmer, and we're working with existing courts, one at Fath Ave, which is an asphalt court, and one at the community center, which is a tiled floor court. Just some things about those. We feel really lucky to have those facilities because there are people coming from Tillsonburg because they don't have an indoor facility in the wintertime. And so we feel fortunate to have them. However, I think there's some way to improve them. And one of them would be looking at those floor surfaces for risk situations, for example. A lot of pickleball courts right now have rubberized surfaces on them. And so I think that those are some things that you need to look at with the court situation in Aylmer. I see in the report a future forecast for pickleball courts. So for the year 2051 would be the target to include 2 additional pickleball courts. Well, I'm going to be 90-something at that point. And
I'll be older.
I think you may need to look at that a little sooner, the way that the sport is growing. And a number of players in the Aylmer area are also going to Dorchester. It has a floor surface. It's a great facility on the knees and ankles and legs. St. Thomas, as you have heard, will have a cover over their surfaces and will also be rubberized surfaces. So I think that those are things that are things to look at in more than the next 20 to 25 year time frame. Anything to add with that, pickleball folks? I would like to say one of the things for me that has been an issue is the central management of the activity programs in town. We are so closely linked with Malahide, and as a resident, I hear constantly in the paper about the dissension between the two places. I really want you to get it together so that we can function as a group and we are a community. You say it's community. It's also Aylmer and it is also Malahide. So that's my encouragement to you is let's get this together so that there isn't this battle between the two municipalities.
Thank you. Just a comment before you go on is the partnership with Malahide. It's not as bad as it seems in the press.
Well, and it may not be. That's sometimes what we read and what we experience also. So point taken.
We're working on it, yeah.
And also, one of the things that you talked about was the joint use with schools. And we really think that that could be a real bonus for for not only gymnasium systems, but also swimming pool systems with Police College, with St. Thomas, with Tillsonburg. I say a lot of the Tillsonburg people are coming here to play pickleball. A lot of Aylmer people go to Tillsonburg to swim. So it is a give and take. So it's not just this community, it's also our communities all around. I don't know if there's any other points that I had. Just one small little point, and it's in the budgeting part of things. I've noticed in playing pickleball here in town over the last few years, when you need new balls in town, it's like new balls for pickleball. It's like pulling teeth to try to get them. And I don't think when we're paying $5 a shot to go and play, for some people that's maybe $25 a week playing pickleball, that you need to go and ask for more ball. You need to go and ask for more balls, but they need to have had enough of a supply and budgeted enough to be able to manage that. And I have seen many of these players go above and beyond. They bring their own balls in, they put their names on the balls. I've seen that happen in other communities and everything. But if you're going to charge for that playtime, I think that there needs to be some other support provided also.
Okay, thank you very much, DJ. Good comments. Anyone else?
I'll slide in, and I'm going to start by tagging with DJ.
Can I have your name, please?
Sorry, Dan Reed, a longtime Aylmer resident and taxpayer. And I think there are a lot of Aylmer and Malahide players who play at the East Elgin Community Complex who feel strongly that because our tax dollars have paid for that facility for such a long period of time, that some consideration should be given to ensuring that people who are coming from Tillsonburg, who we're glad to have come, should not be paying at the same rate that those of us who live here should be. And, you know, we've talked about the idea of a membership. If there were a $150 or $200 annual membership charged to Aylmer and Malahide residents so that we could know that we weren't going to have to rack up a very large personal bill for using this facility. May I add another comment or question about maintenance of current facilities? I think one of the best and most utilized facilities in all of Aylmer is the trail system that follows the floodlands all along the creeks and through the parks. And up until 2 years ago, so personally, my wife and I use that trail easily twice a day. And we, up until 2 years ago, saw it being constantly used throughout the day by walkers and rollerbladers and bikers. And the care and maintenance of that trail system, we feel, has really gone downhill in 2 years. We've noticed, and we appreciate the fact that there is a way for us to make a concern known with that online form. That's a good addition. We had Tom Pollen's personal cell number so that we could text him with an emergency situation, which was great. But we still felt like a lot of the concerns weren't being addressed in a timely way or at all. That includes things like quantities of dirt and sand that accumulate on the trail that are never cleared away. And every time it rains, that becomes mud again. And the same with the tennis courts, which I've used for years. There's a few things that we think could be addressed pretty easily in maintenance by simply having the crew that looks after the parks occasionally take out a blower and blow things off, or get just a shovel and a broom to clean off surfaces. That way those continue to look good, they continue to be well used, and people feel safe. I think bicyclists in particular probably don't appreciate the regular deposits of clippings that happen sometimes twice a week onto that path that are never cleared off. So those would be two things that I would like to see. Maybe they don't even need to be in a master plan so much as just be addressed on a regular basis. So But, you know, we are thankful, I think. We're very thankful that the town of Aylmer has continued to provide good quality facilities. And so, yeah, just sometimes raising the bar a little bit.
Great, thank you very much for those comments.
Hello, my name is Roger Peters. I live in Elmer, and I would like to second what he said about the trails. I bike on them a few times a day at least. I usually take the trails to go to work on my bike. It's faster than driving to the stoplight downtown. I'm sure it's not a big surprise to many people. But yeah, today I hit some sand there and I almost wiped out. And that's the first time I've slipped on there. I'm usually cautious, but I do think that is something that needs to be looked at along just with overall the maintenance of that trail. And I do like a look at the master plan. I saw that there was quite a bit devoted to, or that there was quite a bit of talk about better connections for the trails and stuff like that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what that all results in. I know where we live, we walk down that grass hill at Queen Street. And my wife has really struggled pushing a stroller up that hill sometimes. And it would be good to get some better connections to all of this stuff. Well, one thing that I have noticed as well, there's some connections or there's sometimes seems to be a bit of conflict with some of the purposes of the park, which I know nobody is utilizing it fully, so it's not a surprise at all. But I've noticed things like I play disc golf sometimes, and there's been benches set up a few places right in the middle of where you're throwing, and it's always a concern that you don't want to hit somebody. So I think it would be good just to overall look if there's a place where a bench could be set up where it's not a danger to the people using it and things like that. But overall, I like a lot of what it's doing or what I see in this plan, especially in regards of the active transportation type things. And I was also look at the timelines on things, and it looks like there's a ton of things to do in the first couple of years. I don't know how that's all going to get done. So I think there's going to have to be some picking of things. But yeah, I just wanted to share that.
All right, thank you very much. A lot of things to be done, as you say, one step at a time we're going to take. Anyone else?
Hello, my name's Heidi Wenninger. I just wanted to touch base a little bit maybe on the pool part of things. I noticed that in the review that it stated that the population required would be around 40,000, which when I did a speech maybe that was a little bit ago in the spring, there are areas, municipalities that are similar to ours in size that do have recreational facility, that's arena, pool, community center. Tillsonburg is not open for a pool right now. They're doing huge reno. I'm not sure when it's opening. I think it was about a year that it was going to be closed. St. Thomas's pool doesn't really count for our community unless you have a membership for the Y. You cannot use it. OPC, which we have access to, which was a bit of a battle. The permission has only been granted for so long. I think it was a 2-year agreement, and then it has to be revisited for both high school swim team and also Y, swimming lessons. Terrace Lodge, as we all know, is not available and will never be after COVID's taking place. They don't want that much public in. Our outdoor pool is literally falling apart. I know there's chunks of concrete that are being brought off from the bottom of the pool. This is going back quite a few years, but when the complex was originally built, there was a second phase idea, and that second phase held a pool, along with, I think, a couple of other things. But I think, personally, that it would be a great idea to revisit that, but not just necessarily a pool, make it more of a community center where you have the arenas, you have the pool, you have meeting facilities that seniors can come into and do activities together, youth can come into and do activities together, because right now there isn't a lot in town where people can gather and, play board games or whatever, or groups can gather. So that's just a few things. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much, Heidi. Since Heidi mentioned the recommended service level that you mentioned in your report, my question to either Moira or Haley is, you do mention the words recommended service levels for many of the items in your report. Where do recommended service levels come from?
I'll take on that question, and then I'll ask Haley to jump in if she has anything to add. Recommended service levels are based on our comparator assessment. It's a typical assessment done in all Parks and Recreation master plans. There's no provincially guiding policy for Parks and Recreation, so there's nothing to look to that's mandated or legislated by the province of what a service level is. Therefore, we look to trends and benefits. We look to provincial organizations like Parks and Recreation Ontario, and then we look to comparator analysis of populations and communities of similar sizes and geographic distribution to provide an analysis of what we believe the recommended service level is.
Thank you. The reason I mention it is that, of course, council is going to have to make some tough decisions in the future in terms of what we can afford and what we're going to spend the money on. And some of that may be based on recommended service levels that really are kind of amorphous kind of, statistics, that they really aren't pegged to anything substantial. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up as as something to consider. All right. Members of the public, any other members wish to speak?
Hi, I'm Jeff Robinson. I'm president of the East Elgin Soccer Association here in town. I don't live in town. I don't live in Malahide. I live in Bayham, just across the border. But we run recreational program out at Columbus Field for about 800 players, and during the summer we have 1,500 to 2,000 people go through there. So we have a fairly substantial program. Just a bit of background. What I'm wondering about is, I've heard a lot of talk about coordinating and avoiding duplication, and I'm just wondering if there's any thought of a forum, a council, a committee, or what, not a committee, but a forum for the various programs to come together to coordinate themselves rather than have a municipality take on that role, because right now it's very organic. The individual organizations work amongst themselves to make sure they're not competing with each other. And I just think there might be a place for something to do that. I don't know if that was considered in this report. Another thing, talking about duplication, there is an active Elgin product that people should be encouraged to participate in with their programs, which works very well for organized programs, but I'm not sure the pickleball people are organized in any way other than at the court. So they're going to get left out in that coordination role.
I think
So-
they'll tell us.
Yeah, they'll come and tell you. But anyway, I just, I think rather than trying to do your own database of programs in Elmer, you should be encouraging people in Elmer to participate in Active Elgin and get their programs publicized there, because that's a fairly good forum. Anyway, just some thoughts on coordination.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I'd like to remind people and the public and people watching as well, if you have comments on this, and these comments that I'm talking about maybe comes after the 20th, but there is a town hall on the 25th, and certainly welcome all people to come and talk to Pete Barber and myself in terms of what you'd like to see for the town. So I just put an ad in for the town hall on September the 25th, 6:30 at the old town hall. Any other members of the public?
Good day, everyone. Mike Holmes. I'm president of Elmer Minor Baseball. Been president for 11 years. Been a board member for minor hockey for about the same amount of time, and a volunteer firefighter in town for 20 years. So trying to do my part as a volunteer, like you talked about earlier. We were pleased to see that the report kind of agreed with our assessment of the baseball diamonds and their condition, that they need some modernization, they need safety upgrades, they need some playability upgrades, so we were really pleased to see that. The one question I had was that the report mentioned that there's a deficit of diamonds, I think a deficit of 3 or 4 diamonds currently, but it was marked as a midterm activity. I just wondered if there was any background on why that was marked as a midterm activity when there's a deficit now. I don't know, Stantec can answer that question, how they classified that as midterm?
Okay, go ahead.
If there was a deficit, it should be a short-term priority, so that's something that we'll look into changing. That was just an error on our part. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay, then that's great. And, I've been clear with the town in the past that our priority is to actually just to maintain and fix up the 2 diamonds we have now before we go adding more facilities. We're trying to stretch them as far as we can, just to be cost conscious. My final question is, there was a lot of short-term activities mentioned in the report. Obviously, you can't do them all at once. Do you guys have a roadmap already laid out for how you're going to select what short-term activities you're going to move forward with, or is that something you'll be releasing in the future? Or how can, community get involved as well with that?
Well, it's going to be a process with council and with staff recommendations on this basis, but my personal opinion on that is that we're going to move on all of these things. I'm not sure which one we'll pick first, but all of these recommendations are worthwhile to pursue, so we will deal with them.
Okay.
That's the best I can.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was a plan already, or you're just going to have to
No,
work through.
no.
You're just seeing this for the, first time as well, right? So,
Yeah, we're working on the plan right now.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, questions from council or comments from council? Deputy Mayor Barber.
Thank you, Your Worship. Implementation of the recommendations is obviously going to be cost-driven. To the presenters, did you do any cost estimate on the total package of all of the recommendations eventually were implemented?
So a detailed cost estimate is not part of the scope of this project, particularly because construction costs are changing kind of month to month. But one thing we did consider, and I guess to the gentleman's point of, baseball being in a deficit, that should be a short-term priority. If there is a recommendation that, say, is an improvement to an existing field versus building new, we did do a high-level assessment of what the cost would be. So, for example, if we're saying you're in deficit of 3 baseball diamonds, let's say, a recommendation to improve your existing diamonds would be a short-term priority, whereas the creation of 3 additional diamonds would maybe have been a midterm priority, so that the cost was considered in that aspect, but a detailed cost analysis will still be required as part of council's decision-making process in determining what the priorities of these recommendations are, and even a detailed year-by-year analysis of what will be undertaken, simply because the master plan is a high-level review, and the priorities that we have made, they are just 3 years. So, or they're a 3-year timeframe for short term, and the next 3 years would be medium term, and then 7+ years is considered long term. So if you were to pursue a detailed analysis, you would do a year-by-year basis, and have to do some more detailed costing at that point.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Raes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a comment and a question I think that Andy might be able to help out with. I second what you commented on, saying that all these recommendations are going to be worth moving forward with. It's just going to be a process of working through which ones we can afford to start on right away. I'm assuming, though, once we've worked through all this, that there could be an opportunity to apply for some grants and additional funding to work on or help with the cost of some of these?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly I would hope that we could apply for some grants for some of these, and to speak to kind of the project timeline. Certainly, we do want to keep this moving. This isn't a consultant's report that's going to go on a shelf and get dust. This is going to be kept on working on. Heather and myself are trying to keep it moving forward now. We do have a key staff vacancy, and we're going to need to bring on somebody who has energy to really lead a lot lot of these initiatives, so there might be a lag until we filled that vacancy and get that person on staff and hear their input on it, but we definitely are going to be prioritizing all the objectives, and seeking grants is one of those, definitely.
Thank you.
And I would like to add personally to what Andy just said, that we're not going to put this report on the shelf. It's just going to be dealt with. All right. Anyone else from council? Councilor DeRosier.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two things. One, a concern with the actual plan itself, and then a comment to some of the residents here that have made comments themselves. So firstly, my concern stems from page 36, which is distribution of parkland. Reading the report, the end of this paragraph states, based on walkability of existing parkland, the town can consider additional parkland in areas outside of the walkable radius. When I review this figure 18 parkland distribution, it's disappointing to me that the southeast portion of town is included within that radius. And I'm assuming it was included due to Parkland 12 and 13, which 12 is the Elmer Fairgrounds, or Old Elmer Fairgrounds, and 13 is Centennial Park. I live within this area. The only park amenities that are on those two spaces is a 4-piece swing set. So the fact that this area would not be considered for additional parkland development because it's included in this radius is disappointing, because a 4-piece swing set to me is not acceptable parkland amenities for a residential area of this size. So that would be my comment to that, is I feel this is a false assessment to assume that this area is adequately given parkland just based on that fact. So that's my comment to that. I don't know if Sandtech has a response.
Stantec, go ahead.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I can see how the interpretation of that is how you're reading it. The intention of that assessment was solely geographical, so from a per hectare perspective. So it wasn't considering the amount of amenity spaces or the amenities that are provided within that parkland. It was strictly a geographical analysis of what can be accessed. So it wasn't an assessment of whether it's in deficit, which you're saying it is. So then that's the opportunity to provide additional amenities, and that was covered in the kind of subsequent sections where we speak to what areas are in deficit of what amenities. The section you're referring to is solely a geographical analysis, but we can look to kind of clarifying that so it's not suggesting that the area you're speaking of Centennial Park and the fairgrounds don't need additional improvement of park amenities.
Yes, I think that's just was my fears, that this assessment would be taken and then staff would make those assumptions for development of parkland based off this assessment. So I appreciate you clarifying. The other comment I had was to Dan and Roger. Thank you very much for your words. I fully support their comments regarding trail and facility maintenance. So much so that, I've tried the 11 months that I've been here to work with staff for that exact thing, focusing on trail and facility maintenance. So I just wanted to second what they said and thank them very much for that comment.
Okay, thank you. The other members of council? Okay. I noticed a number of people came in just a few minutes ago, and I want to make sure that all of the public get a chance to speak who wanted to speak. Is there anyone else in the public back there that wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will move on with the, oh, is there some, sorry, somebody stood up. Go ahead, go ahead. Stand with.
Not council member yet. Is this just Parks and
Could we
Recreational?
have your name first? Have your name.
My name is John Tykerope. So my question is this just Parks and Recreational
Yes.
meeting
Yes, it
only?
is.
So there's no development,
No discussion, anything except the master plan right here.
oh, okay, okay.
Right.
All right, how will I find out when the, my letter of relief will be on?
It's part of the agenda that comes up later. You won't have a chance to comment at that time, however, but council will be discussing it.
Okay. So I can't speak on that matter right now?
That's right.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Great, seeing nobody else, can we read the motion again, and then we'll vote on it?
Certainly, through you, your worship. This motion was moved by Councillor Van Raes and seconded by Deputy Mayor Barber, and it reads that the presentation from Stantec regarding the Parks and Recreation Master Plan be received for information, and that the comments from the members of the public be received for information, and further that staff be directed to bring forward a final Parks and Recreation Master Plan for approval at the September 20th, 2023 meeting of council.
Any further discussion by council? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, communications and staff reports. We have a motion.
Great. Through you, your worship, the motion reads that the September 6th, 2023 consent agenda be received for information, and that the included recommendations within the staff reports be adopted, and further that council approves the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on August the 9th, 2023.
Mover and a seconder, Councillor Van Raes and Councillor Desrosiers. Any discussion by council? Note that these are the communications and the minutes, part of the consent agenda. Seeing none, all those in favor? As carried. Great. Action items, number 7. Manager of Operations report on the annual water system. Resolute.
That report, Operations 2423, entitled MECP Annual Water System Inspection Report, be received for information.
Moving to seconder, Councillor Rahi and Councillor Chapman. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Is carried, thank you. Item 7.2, Manager of Operations.
That report, Operations 2523, entitled DWQMS Infrastructure Review, be received for information.
Mover and seconder, Councillor Desrosiers, Deputy Mayor Barber. I went blank there, Pete.
We're even now, Jack.
There's too many words as Deputy Mayor.
I was waiting for
I
it.
think Connor was making this report, I believe.
Yes, Your Worship. We're speaking to the infrastructure review right now? Or the,
We're looking at 7.2, which is, the DWQMS infrastructure.
all right. So the purpose, or this report fulfills requirements under element 14 of the DWQMS. The purpose of the review is to ensure that the town annually assesses its drinking water system's ability to provide safe drinking water to the public. The review also considers infrastructure improvements as it relates to the outcomes of the town's risk assessment, documented under element 8. By taking our risk assessment into consideration, we can identify ways to reduce risk through infrastructure improvement. Staff are pleased with the overall condition of our infrastructure and look forward to future plans for water main replacements through road reconstructions. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Is carried. Thank you. Item 7.3, report on operational plan annual management review resolution.
That report, Operations 2623, entitled DWQMS Operational Plan Annual Review 2023, be received for information.
Mover and seconder, Councillor Van Raes and Councillor Chapman. Connor?
Thank you, Your Worship. The town of Elmer is also required to conduct an annual management review, and this satisfies element 20 of Ontario DWQMS. This report also supports the goal of public service excellence as water system compliance reflects delivery of municipal services in a safe and efficient manner. And I'm also happy to answer any questions related to.
Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. All right. And 7.4, the Director of Corporate Services dealing with the AIM logo resolution.
That report, Clerk 4723, entitled Elmer Industrial Manufacturing AIM Park Logo and Development Update, be received for information, and that council approves the Elmer Industrial Manufacturing Park logo as presented, it being noted that the town contracted realty firm may make minor adjustments to best align with corporate branding for promotional materials.
Moving seconder, Councillor Oslash and Deputy Mayor Barber. Got you that time. Right. Discussion? Deputy Mayor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. Of the three, my choice would be number one.
Councillor Oslash.
Thank you, Your Worship. My choice would be number one, too.
Number one or two?
Number one. Number one.
Number one. Sorry about that. Anyone else? Councillor Van Raes.
I originally was leaning towards number one. Number three looks all right, but I would go with number one as well.
Anyone else? Seeing none? This sounds as if number one seems to be the consensus, so we'll vote on number one. All right. So the resolution will read that we pick number one. All those in favor? As carried. Thank you. 7.5, grants and donations.
Resolution?
Okay, resolution.
That report, Clerk 4523, entitled Grants and Donations, Operational Budget 2024, be received for information, and that council sets blank dollars as the total budget for community grant and donation funding for 2024, and further that council directs the Director of Financial Services to include this consideration within the 2024 operating budget.
Mover and seconder, Councillor Desrosiers and Councillor Oslash. Discussion. We're looking for a number to put as the cap number on grants and donation. Councillor Oslash.
Yes, Your Worship. What was the number last year? Was it around 60,000?
I think it was closer to 70,000, right? So I don't have an exact number.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was $66,150.
I'm out by a few. I'd like to remain the same.
Raise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and potentially to Heather. I don't know if you have the numbers, but sir, do you have an average of maybe what was funded over the last few years? Has it been around the same?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Van Raes. I think Josh put in the report, we went back to 2022 and 2023. 2022 was around 54,000. 2023 was just stated at 66,000 roughly. We were going to go back further, but it was kind of skewed there for a couple years by COVID. There were some community donations that weren't happening through the New Year's Eve events, and I believe it was the parade. So there was a couple donations that weren't included in those years, so we excluded those. But yeah, between 4,000 and 66,000 in the last couple years is the average.
Okay.
That includes the donations to the museum and the cemetery, and then the other community groups also.
Okay, thank you. Going to follow up. The reason I asked was just noticed those ones, but I wasn't sure if, like, COVID obviously played a part, but just because there was like a over $10,000 difference, or $13,000, so that's why I wasn't sure if there was an average from before, or, but it might not really make a difference now if COVID.
If I can comment again on that, it was around 50,000 in those years also that was budgeted for. It just, some of those donations didn't come through because of COVID.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Desrosiers.
I feel like I'll probably be the only conservative one here, but I feel like it should be lower than what is currently set. It doesn't have to be much, but I know, especially given our finance committee forecasted capital expenses, like, there's only so much money in the piggy bank, so if we don't make cuts here, it's going to have to be somewhere else. So even if we can lower it slightly, I mean, every little bit will add up. So I think it should be lowered than what it currently is. It doesn't have to be by much, but I think we should be setting a cap that's lower than what it currently is set at.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Harper.
Along those lines, Your Worship, perhaps 60,000, a 10% reduction might be appropriate?
Anyone else? Councillor Roth.
Mayor, I think 55,000 to 60,000 is a pretty reasonable amount. It's hard, you're gonna make someone angry no matter where you take it from. Myself, is my thought, but we do give out quite a bit more than a lot of the other municipalities, it says in here. That's just my thought. It is quite a bit
Yeah,
of money.
I think, we struggle with this because all of the groups that ask for money are, worthwhile endeavors. But we're dealing with, the increased expectation syndrome, in which you give money this year and the next year, expect a little bit more, and eventually we find ourselves in the position that we're in now, where we used to have 50,000 kind of as an average, now we have 66,500, and it just keeps climbing. And it's hard to say no unless we have some kind of a guideline. I personally, I agree with Councillor Desrosiers that we should go low and go back to historical number, which is 50. So we're all over the map here on this, but think about that anyway. Councillor Van Raes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Rahe about around the 55,000 mark. I think I'm comfortable with. It's great to be able to give back. I think it's great incentives to a lot of the community groups and people that are applying for grants, but capping it, that's the number I'd feel comfortable with. And just a further comment that if we do see new organizations or new people that are coming forward and asking for grants, maybe that's a time that we start revisiting or sit down and have a conversation about how we distribute those funds.
Councillor Oslich first, then Councillor Desrosiers.
Yes, Your Worship. I would settle on 55 to 60,000.
And I support your 50,000 suggestion.
I'm hearing 3 people at 55 so far.
I would say 55. Part of the reason is that all expenses have gone up. Some of the things that we do give grants for are, they're things that are beneficial to the community, and without our support, they may not happen. So I'm okay with 55. I think that's a $11,000 reduction, and I think that's reasonable. And we would have to think about how it will be distributed, even at 55,000.
Sure, yeah, we have lots of leeway in that. So I'm hearing like a consensus at 55. Let's make 55 the number on the resolution. Any further discussion on this? Because I'll call the question at 55. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Recycling update resolution.
That report CAO 4723 respecting circular materials recycling update be received as information, and that council authorizes staff to enter into an agreement with Circular Materials Ontario or their service provider for the collection of approximately 75 non-eligible locations for a 2-year period.
Mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Barber, Councillor Van Raes. You have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, the little thing that I didn't know about recycling was that municipalities never actually had to pick up recycling from businesses. That was an additional service level that most municipalities adopted with the Blue Box program. Now that the recycling has been transferred to producer responsibility, they're only covering residential pickups. So there are about 75 non-eligible business locations in Elmer that will stop receiving recycling services unless we top it up a bit. So the amount would be about $10,000 a year for this to be covered. And we're suggesting just doing it for a 2-year period because as municipalities transition, we think a lot of other ones will be faced with very similar choices around this. So we want to evaluate what other municipalities are doing on this regard, because certainly environmental stewardship is important. I don't think we want to see people throwing recyclables in the garbage during this period.
This isn't a new expense, though, is it?
This isn't a new expense. We're saving money on the contract becoming producer responsibility. This is a portion of the actual recycling costs that we anticipate to keep for the next 2 years. So, and there's also a slight administration costs that they pay to us too. So it should, overall, the transition has benefited us quite significantly.
Councillor Ryan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a question to Andy. Is that a flat rate cost every year, no matter what, whether everybody uses it or they don't use it? Like, it's not by the pound or anything, it's just whether it gets used or not, that's the cost?
It's going to be interesting to see how this new recycling change rolls out in the province, because there is our understanding is it's going to be a flat rate cost. But there are requirements upon the producers now of the waste to start reducing the amount of collected recyclables. And after year 1, it's supposed to go down to 75%. So this is supposed to actually reduce the amount of recyclables within 4 years to 25% of what they currently are. So it's that's the intention of the province, is it's everything you're buying in the grocery store will be in less recyclable materials, essentially.
Deputy Mayor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. It's my understanding that virtually all of the 75 locations that are presently receiving Blue Box service are smaller ventures that aren't commercially viable to have it picked up in bulk. And the intent is to recycle. And if these folks are buying into it, why wouldn't the municipality support them in their endeavors?
Anyone else? Very well. Have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Carried. 7.8, CAO, or did I miss one? Oh, yes, I did. 7.7, report on legal services. Have a motion.
That report CAO 4823 respecting a request for proposal for legal services be received as information, and that council endorse issuance of the request for proposals for legal services to the town of Elmer.
Mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Chapman, second by Councillor Desrosiers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just part of our ongoing efforts to ensure complete conformity with our procurement policy. You recall I think the start of this term, we did engineering services and awarded those, which was another long-standing contract with one vendor. We certainly do really value our current legal services provider, and we're going to be encouraging them to apply again. But it's important for the public trust that we go out to market and make sure that we're getting good market value for all our services, and that's what this process will enact. And we will also continue to keep historical files with the lawyers that have worked on them because we don't want to pay people to do the same research twice, essentially.
Council. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? It's carried, thank you. 7.8, EMO update. Motion.
That report, CAO 4923, respecting an AMO, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, update, be received as information.
Mover and seconder, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Van Raes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you were at the AMO delegations as well as Josh, and they were, I'd say, very highly successful. The town of Elmer did a great job tying the issues of childcare, physician recruitment, and the boundary adjustment to the Volkswagen plant and the growth that we're going to see in this area, and I think it was very well received. And Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you have any further comments about, specifically about the physician recruitment, which you did such an amazing job at for this community.
I love doing that. Just a comment, for a town our size, we certainly left a mark because, we're one of the smaller communities of the 444 municipalities in Ontario, and we made three appointments with three different ministers, and really, I think, left a very good reputation with all of them. And we did receive thank you letters from all of them for being there. They mentioned everybody but Josh. Josh was there too, and he was there for eye candy, so he was kind of no, sorry. Yeah. But he was there as a participant in the delegations, and I say Elmer left a good impression, very good. And Andy was the one who did all the reports, so I was able to speak to the health recruitment at length. But really, Andy deserves all the credit for writing the reports. So thank you. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. New business and matters of urgency. See none. Reading of bylaws. Josh.
That council gives 3 readings to and approves the following bylaws. Bylaw 5523, being a bylaw to amend the bylaw 2723, which is the reserve and reserve fund policy for the town of Elmer, and the bylaw 5623, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at the regular council meeting held on August the 9th, 2023.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Rahi. Deputy Mayor Barber. Questions or comments? All those in favor? It's carried. Inquiries by members. Deputy Mayor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. The County of Elgin is the administrator of provincial offenses through the provincial court of the fines that are levied through process. Is there any transparency between the county and the municipalities, especially in light of 2 significant fines that have recently been levied in provincial court, that eventually Elmer will receive those funds?
I'm going to ask Andy first to deal with that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly we're continuing to work with the Elgin County on trying to get more information on how the fines are dispersed and what deductions are made from them. So we'll be meeting with the CAOs again on this Friday, and again asking for some more information, because right now we have a general calculation, but we don't see the full deductions that are made. And when you see large fines that we know our police service certainly invested a significant amount of time and resources in, the majority of those should be coming directly back to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Certainly a significant question in terms of our relationship with the county, and I hope to carry this further at the county level. So thank you for the question. Any other inquiries, statements, and committee reports? Deputy Mayor Barber.
Thank you again, Your Worship. Information purposes, Purolator is now able to be done locally at the Esso station both for receipt and shipment. Much more convenient than having to go into St. Thomas to pick up a package that was not able to be delivered. It goes right to the Esso station. Secondly, the Aylmer Area Secondary Water Board met today. There were, on the first and second quarters, there were no water quality issues, no complaints being received, and on budget halfway through the year.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Next item is report of the mayor. I do have some things I want to say. I haven't said anything for a while, so I just give council an idea of what I've been doing for the last month or so. I'll make this as quick as I can. I did meet with Sean Doyle at the Family Central to talk about how the Family Central was doing in terms of the donations it received and what it was doing for the town. And as you know, I did name the Family Central as the mayor's thank you for the month of August. I did an interview with Eastlink on fair history just before the fair. Some of you may have caught that on Eastlink. It was a fairly long interview. I did attend the Pride Picnic, which is the first time Elgin County and the Pride organization here has done a picnic. It was very well attended. That was done, that was August the 7th, I think. And did attend the 20th anniversary of The Bridge, which is the Mennonite radio station, on August the 18th. And I did meet the cyclists in the Three-Port Tour, which took place on August the 19th. I want to say a few things about the Three-Port Tour. This is a tour that covers 4 of the townships of Elgin County, because it starts in Elmer and goes to Port Burwell and then Port Bruce and then Port Stanley and ends up back in Elmer. And most people come for the 160-kilometer tour. Imagine that, 160 kilometers. I can do it too in a short period of a day. And it was very well attended, over 300 people, and I met them early in the morning, 6:30. I spoke to about 100 people. Most of them were from out of town, from Windsor, from Toronto, from Hamilton, various places like that. So I think it's an important kind of tourist attraction for the town. I just wish that Elgin County had advertises it a little bit better than they do, because I think it's a very significant festival for Elmer. I did, go to the AMO conference and took part in the presentation of horseshoe certificates with Deputy Mayor Barber on, when was that? Just August 29th, not too very long ago. Young people who it costs absolutely nothing to belong to this sports organization for people, regardless of your age. Absolutely nothing. You don't have to spend anything. And a number of people had actually national certificates in terms of horseshoe throwing. They comment that it's one of the few areas that young people can throw iron without any penalty. We also attended the Chicken Farmers of Ontario presentation, which was, I guess, in today's paper, so you probably saw that. We're giving a number of chickens to the local food bank. And Andy and I met with MP Karen Vecchio and went over some of the items that Karen can help us with in terms of the town's dealing with housing and other areas that impact federally. And I just also want to say that it was brought up in one of the comments by the public today that I do meet occasionally with Mayor Giguère from Malahide. And we do have spirited discussions, but amiable discussions, and trying to keep us up to date with how either one of us feels in terms especially of the complex, but not only just the complex. So I just wanted to let you know that I do carry on continued discussions with her. Okay, are there any notices of motion? Have a meeting closed to the public, a resolution.
That council enters a meeting closed to the public at 7:33 PM for the purpose of discussing the following items. We've got item 14.1, and this is a report by the Chief Administrative Officer, Report CAO 5023, This is a legal update regarding an employee matter, and consideration of this item is closed to the public pursuant to Section 239-2B of the Municipal Act as amended, as the subject matter pertains to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
Mover and seconder, Councilor Strozzi and Councilor Chapman. All those in favor? It's carried, and we will have a short recess.
So the motion reads that council rises from the meeting closed to the public at 8:08 PM and reports the following: that council gave advice to the chief administrative officer respecting the report CAO 5023, and that was an update on an employee-related matter, and closed as the subject matter related to personal matters about an identifiable individual.
Thank you. Mover and seconder. Councilor Desrosiers and Councilor Van Raes. All in favor? Carried. Adjournment motion.
That council do now adjourn at 8:09 PM.
Mover and seconder. Councilor Van Raes, Councilor Chapman. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Not to be mutually exclusive.